So Radhika Duggal is a marketing leader with extensive experience in highly regulated industries such as healthcare and financial services. She's an adjunct professor of marketing at New York University and is the author of Stukent's Consumer Behavior digital textbook, as well as head of student marketing at Chase Bank. So she brings a lot of various experience to the table here, and we're excited to learn from Radhika. She's going to be talking today about technology's impact on consumer behavior, and specifically why our students need to know, what they need to know about this. So Radhika, without further ado, I will chime off and turn the time over to you.
Perfect. And I think there is something I need to do to be able to change the slides that I have forgotten about. So any direction you can give me on that would be lovely.
Yeah, I believe you just hit enter. Is that correct?
That is not working, but I can also ask you to change the slides if that's easier. I can just indicate.
Yeah, we can do that. Just fine.
Yeah. All right, let's do that. Well, excellent. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to spend a couple of minutes with folks on the line talking a little bit about something that might actually seem like common sense to us and may actually seem like our students shouldn't care. But one of the things I've seen so concretely through my 6 years now teaching consumer behavior at various universities throughout New York City is that technology's impact on consumer behavior, while it might seem like common sense to us and our students, it is the thing that will help our students get full-time jobs. And they all seem to care about that, fortunately. So we're going to talk about 3 things specifically, but underscoring all of the lessons of these 3 things is how we can convince our students to actually pay attention and think about this strategically as they think about how they can get enrolled in whether it's a startup, a big company, or any job they want in the future. 3 things we're going to cover are, first, how has the marketing concept evolved? How has marketing evolved because of technology's impact on consumer behavior? The second is how technology has actually enabled us to better understand consumers and the job types that really opens up for our students in the future. And the third is really around how technology has helped marketers overcome 2 real challenges we faced in the past. And the one thing I would say before we dive in is I have a chapter on this in my book, and I've taught that content now for several years. And when I teach it before the lecture, when students read what used to be a PDF before there was a book and now there's a textbook, they always come in saying, well, this is something technology has been around my entire life. Why are we spending an hour talking about this? I hope that by the end of our 30 minutes together, you guys have a sense of what we as professors can bring to the table to help students learn about something that seems like it was far in the past, but actually still materially impacts the work environments that we work in today. All right, so I'm going to dive right in. So the first piece that I really want to talk about is how has technology impacted the marketing concept? And as marketing professors, one of the first lessons we teach our kids is about the 4 Ps: price, product, place, promotion. And this is actually a construct that many of us likely know was developed by Edmund Jerome McCarthy in the 1960s. He wrote this book called The Basic Marketing, a Managerial Approach. And according to McCarthy, marketers can leverage these 4 aspects of the marketing mix to really develop a holistic marketing strategy. And I can tell you, look, created in the 1960s or not, this is still something I very much rely on today in my day job. But the reality is, consumer behavior has transformed the way we think about these 4 elements of the marketing mix, primarily because of technology. There has not been any other phenomenon that has changed these 4 elements of the mix like technology has. So let's talk a little bit about how for each of these, what the change is. Actually, go back one more slide. We're still on the previous slide. Can you guys go back one slide? And if not, yeah, perfect. So we're going to talk a little bit about how technology has impacted each one of these, what it means for a marketer, and then why our kids should care. Why should our students care? So let's talk about price first. Think about it. As consumers, it's second nature for us at this point to compare prices of various products through different mechanisms, particularly online. So you might be at a department store. And if you're at a department store and you're looking for a pair of trousers, a blazer, etc., what you might do is find something you love, pull up your smartphone, and comparison shop. Look for that same item, whether through Google Shopping, on Amazon, through the manufacturer's website, and you will figure out where can I get that same thing at the cheapest price, and that's how you'll buy. You won't necessarily buy from the store you're physically in. So what does that mean for marketers? Well, for marketers, it means that even though price isn't the only thing that matters to consumers, for a lot of products and for a lot of consumers, it is one of the primary decision drivers. So it means marketers have to shift how we think about price. Think about stores like Target and Best Buy, who now match prices for items that consumers find online. That strategy can work for things like lower involvement products. What does this really mean for our students? It means that roles in the world of pricing are incredibly, incredibly important, more so now than they ever have been in the past. And there's the quant side of pricing, which is, think about like a revenue manager's role in a hospitality industry or in an airline industry. That is someone who's deep in the numbers and is able to dynamically price rooms, airline seats on different platforms at different times. That job continues to rise in importance because of technology's impact on price, because our consumers are comparison shopping. A second piece that's really critical here, because of the technology's impact on consumer behavior, is the softer side of price. And that's really about price negotiations. Think about how important it is in a hospitality company, for example, to have that person who can negotiate with Expedia or the third parties. These are jobs that are newly created that our students are poised to take on simply because they are tech savvy and they are technology natives. They understand consumer behavior around price because they're natives at it. The second is product. So think about how consumer behavior and technology has shifted simply because of the advent of technology. So think about reading, right? I now only read on my smartphone. Someone actually sent me a box of books. It was a friend, and my husband said, "Why did someone send you physical books? What are you going to do with this?" And he was right. I literally only read on my phone. Others read on a Kindle or a similar device. And in fact, since by 2018, 25% of literature consumption is now done in a digital fashion, and that's only poised to increase. So what does this mean for our students? It means that the demand for marketers focused on technology product innovation has grown drastically. Now, a product manager role, while in tech companies now isn't necessarily thought of as part of the marketing function, it absolutely is. Think about it. Product is one of the 4 elements of the marketing mix, and this technology product manager role is critical. The product manager is the person that is managing the developers to develop the technology product. That is a customer, or that is a person who needs to deeply understand the consumer behavior of the customers for whom they're developing a product. That product manager is a person that needs to take that market research results and their understanding of consumer behavior and break it down so that their developers can actually understand and build functionality for the right customer. This is a new-ish role. Call it the last 7 to 8 years. This role has exploded, and marketing students are incredibly poised to take on these roles because, again, they're natives of using these digital products. Think about it. Our students grew up with Uber. They didn't grow up thinking cabs were the only way, especially for someone who lives in New York City. They grew up with an app on their phone for banking. They grew up with telemedicine, right? And not having to go to the doctor every time. So when our students go to get roles or get jobs, product management is an incredibly robust field that is growing, that is hiring, and our students as technology and digital natives are poised to get those jobs. The third piece is place. So when McCarthy thought of place, he really thought about it as defining how do you make retail stores as close to the customer as possible. We all know that place is a totally different thing. According to TechCrunch, 79% of consumers shop online, and that's up from 22% in the year 2000. 80% of consumers are shopping online. That means the place is online. It's not a physical place. And what does that mean for our students as they're thinking about jobs and roles? Well, what that means is, while the focus used to be on the in-store experience and beautiful merchandising, those jobs still exist. That's absolutely true. But there's a huge demand for UX designers who create a simple, seamless online experience, for online merchandisers who can create a beautiful website where the products seem cohesive. And the last is promotion. So because technology has created a significant shift in where we spend our time as consumers, therefore, a number of new marketing channels have evolved because we market to consumers in the places in which they spend their time, at least if we're doing our jobs right? Because that's how they're going to come across our ads. So in 2017, a company called Flurry Analytics Blog conducted a survey, and they found that the average US consumer spends 5 hours per day on his or her phone. 5 hours per day. That means promotion and the ability to do it on mobile, the ability to do it through digital channels, it's incredibly critical. And by the way, that study indicates that 50% of that 5 hours is spent on social media, Facebook, Snapchat, etc. So what does that mean for marketers? It means marketers need to think about, how do we prioritize those channels to make sure we are, again, getting consumers where they are. And if you think about it, our students are poised for those social media roles. They've grown up with it. They're natives at it. They know how to use it. Like, let's be honest, they know how to use it better than we do in many cases. And because of that, they should absolutely be vying for those opportunities. So I bring all of that up to say that while our Gen Z students might feel that it's not relevant to understand how technology has changed the marketing mix, the reality is one of the reasons they're in school is to get that full-time job after school. And if they can get a sense for what their bosses or their bosses' bosses that work in some of the companies they might want to work at, if they can get a sense for the struggles that these folks who are less native, who are less attuned to some of these technological shifts, if our students can understand that, they can position themselves in interviews to be the subject matter expert, to bring that digital nativeness to a company so that they can actually make themselves critical from day one. All right, now let's turn the slide. And we're going to move on to our second goal, which is really understanding how technology has enabled us to gain broader access to our consumers. This is a huge positive thing, a boon for marketers, that technology has enabled us to gain access to consumers so that we can not only get their insights in a quicker manner, right? Market research that used to take 3 months now can take literally 2 weeks because you have access to an online panel of consumers that are eager to understand how they can help, how they can provide insights. Not only is that incredible, but we're able to get an understanding of the context in which consumers make their purchase decisions. That is incredibly, incredibly important. So Philip Graves, who's a leading expert on consumer behavior, and he wrote this book called Consumerology, he said, if you want to know why someone does or doesn't buy something, you have to understand the environment that shapes their purchase behavior. Divorcing the quest for understanding the context in which this takes place is going to lead your strategy astray. You have to, as a marketer, understand the context in which purchase decisions are made. And technology now enables to do that. Whereas in the past, we used to get research results, and it's sort of like, all right, well, these research results, you're getting them through a focus group or through an IDI. That's not results that come from the context in which people make purchase decisions. That's the context of people sitting in a white room, not unlike the one I'm sitting in right now, where they're talking to a researcher one-on-one. That doesn't come with the holistic context in which real decisions are made. Technology enables us to actually get those decisions. And there's a number of different ways you can do that. So for example, things like Fitbit, right? Fitbit and Google are sounding like Google's going to purchase Fitbit. What that's going to enable Fitbit and Google to do is it's going to enable Google to have a broader picture of context so that they can better market to consumers. Think about it. Fitbit has all of our biometric measurements. It has all of our location data. And if Google has that context, where we are, what are we doing? Are we running? Are we walking? Think about their ability to serve us more targeted ads that are targeted to my needs. So for example, I live in Greenwich Village in New York. Pretend I'm going for a run down the West Side Highway. If I have a Fitbit device and Google has the ability to see my biometric data, they can serve me a personalized ad to go buy water somewhere around my running route because they'll know my location. They'll know that I'm running, so it's fair to assume I'm thirsty. They'll be able to send me more targeted insights that's based on the context of my behavior. And again, our students are natives in using these products. They've grown up using a wearable device. They've grown up as digital natives, and they are then going to be better poised to be the voice within the companies they work at to make a play for ideas that enable marketers to create content that is more relevant to the context in which consumers operate. The third piece we're going to talk about is how technology enables us as marketers to really overcome our most significant challenges. Now, there's a reality that there are two really critical challenges that technology has helped us with. The first is targeting, and the second is scaling. So in the past, traditional marketing tactics like print and broadcast and out of home, like billboards, for example, they were the cornerstone of our marketing plans. But their efficacy, whether they worked or not, that was predicated on reach. And you just had to hope that your target market was among the many millions of people that might see your television commercial, that might walk by your billboard, etc. You just had to hope. But thanks to technology, that's not the case anymore. I have the ability to use social media, for example, to really get granular on who am I targeting. I can say, for example, I'm targeting students in this geographic location who have liked these other companies, who have this behavior, and I'm only going to target them between the hours of 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. or something like that. I can get really granular on targeting because of technology. I can also get really granular on what the messaging, right? On the messaging that I'm going to serve up to those consumers. And I can get granular on when. Solving this targeting problem means that marketers are going to be able to make any ad they serve up, number one, more effective because you can serve it to the right consumer at the right time with the right message, but also more cost effective. Let's talk about that cost effectiveness for a second, because technology has enabled folks to scale more cost effectively. And I'm sorry, we're actually on the next slide. Apologies. Let's think about scaling. So before I joined Chase, I worked at a company called Common Bond. We were about 100 people when I left. And scaling anything, any tactic for a startup is incredibly challenging. You simply don't have the budgets that a Chase or a Bank of America or a larger bank might have, but you oftentimes are competing in the same space. What technology has enabled you to do is to scale cost effectively. Now, at the end of the day, the company with the bigger budget might still have an advantage, and we should be very clear on that. But through targeting, you're able to identify exactly who your target customer is, target only them, and pay only for them to actually see your ad. It's really an incredible thing. So look, at the end of the day, I've talked a lot, and I'd love to leave a little bit of time for questions. But it's clear that technology has created channels that are changing the way consumers behave now, and this is only going to accelerate in the future. And the reason I think it's so critical for our students to understand this, even though to them it might seem like a thing of the past, is twofold. Number one, if they understand the context within which their boss or their boss's boss are operating and how oftentimes difficult it is for someone who didn't grow up as a digital native to operate in this environment, they can position themselves as the expert and they can add real value to a company on day one. And the second thing is this acceleration, it's only going to change. So we look at AI as the next frontier of marketing. And if our students can get savvy on some of these things that are the next frontier of marketing, imagine how impressive they are going to look when they go into an interview and say, I recognize where you came from. Here's where we are today and how technology has impacted our consumers and what that means for us. And here's what it's going to mean in the future. So I just think giving them the context on how technology has impacted consumer behavior is going to enable us to set them up for success in the future. All right, I've talked a lot. I'd love to answer any questions that folks may have. I can't hear you, though.
Now you can hear me, right?
Perfect. Now I can.
All right. What I said was, all right, thank you, Radhika. Yeah, we have some questions in the queue. The first question, Radhika, can you talk about any tools or hands-on activities in a consumer behavior class? I don't know if there's things that you kind of carry over from Chase or just the industry, but can you address anything of that nature as far as activities or hands-on things that you're involving in your class?
Yes, absolutely. So I was just taking notes on a couple of things while you were speaking. So the first thing is, in my consumer behavior class in particular, one of the things I ask the students to do is read the chapter in the consumer behavior text in advance of class. And then I assign, students are broken up into 10 to 12 groups based on the number of kids in the class. I assign each group one concept in a particular chapter. So for example, if we're in chapter 1 of the book, 3 of the 10 groups are assigned a separate concept that come from chapter 1. Let's pretend chapter 1 is on consumer learning. Then someone needs to talk about the learning process. One group talks about the learning process overall. One group talks about another concept. One group talks about a third concept. They talk about these concepts by coming into class and doing a 5-minute presentation on each of the topics they're assigned. So 2 or 3 groups in every class, they're actually teaching the class. What that does is, number one, it's a little bit more engaging for the students to have, someone other than me standing up in the class and preaching at them. It requires them to read the book in advance, which I tend to think students need to hear or read something 3 times in order to actually process and understand it, especially something like consumer behavior that has a lot of theory. And it also is just a little more engaging. You can encourage students, like, respect your peers, put your laptop down when your peers and your friends are speaking, and that seems to help tremendously. The next thing I'll say is, included in the textbook are actually a number of activities that we do encourage folks to use, and I'd encourage folks to use them because those activities really do help to bring the content to life. And the last thing I'd say is, I take a lot of care in choosing the right guest speakers. So there are particular areas of subject matter where I don't have expertise. For example, media planning. I'm not a media planner, and I just never have. So I make sure to have a guest speaker come in and talk about media planning. And what that does is, A, it gives students insight into a different career path that they might never have known was possible. B, it forces them to be on their best behavior, Google questions in advance, look that person up on LinkedIn, and they get really excited about the concept of having someone new come in and talk to them.
Awesome, thank you. So you talked a lot about different technologies that are existing that maybe we didn't have while we were going through university or growing up with. So our students are coming to class experts within these tools and technology. As an instructor, how do you remain the authority in the classroom if you feel as though these students are maybe a better expert with that technology?
I think there's a couple of things that are important here. The first is, you are the authority on how it is to either work in a work environment without this, whether it's in a university or in a corporation. You are also the authority on what was it like in the past, right? So you are the authority, and you actually mimic, because of that, you mimic the environment the students are going to go into. So I work at JP Morgan Chase. Most of my bosses and colleagues and their bosses and colleagues, they didn't have access to this technology when they were growing up. So things like social and digital, there's room for expertise. So that's thing number one. You are still the authority on what it was before. And it's the question in my mind is, how do you convince students that that's actually really critical? And you convince them that that's really critical because they need to understand the context in which their employers operate. The second thing is, let the students teach you what they know and acknowledge the fact that they grew up with this, they know this, and be open to learning a thing or two. I gotta be honest, my students have taught me so much, primarily because A, they are experts, B, I'm open to learning. And that's also a much more robust environment. So for example, we do a lesson that's focused a little bit on social media, and we create our own social posts, whether in Facebook, in LinkedIn, in Twitter, in Snapchat, etc. And students are teaching me, particularly on Snap, where I have like less familiarity, unfortunately, but need to have more familiarity. They're teaching me. We do the same thing with TikTok. So I think there's a sense of acknowledging what you do know, and there's a sense of acknowledging openness, and instead of openness to what you don't know, and instead of shutting that down, being really open to the students being the ones that lead some of those lessons, because why not highlight their expertise?
Great. More questions. Where do you find real world examples of good practices of consumer behavior that you implement in your class? Do you have like a go-to resource, or how do you find those?
I actually just read a lot every day. So there's a couple of podcasts that I subscribe to that are not actually marketing news, but just news. And then there's one marketing news newsletter that I subscribe to. So I subscribe to the Daily Skim, which my students also tend to use. So it's really nice to pick up real world news examples from that and talk about how that consumer behavior has driven some of those outcomes. And that's both a podcast as well as a newsletter. Subscribe to the 10 Point by the Wall Street Journal, which is a newsletter. The Daily by the Wall Street Journal, which by the New York Times. A lot of my students also use the Daily. The Wall Street Journal also has a marketing newsletter that they send daily. And then the last thing is the Wall Street Journal has a marketing roundup that they send every Friday. What that does is it outlines 5 to 7 marketing stories of the week, as well as questions that you as a professor can share with your students and have a discussion around in class. The reason I use the news and those various sources is, number one, some of my students also use those sources, and I find that it enables me to connect better with them. But also, I think one of the gaps that our students have is they kind of brush the news off. I've heard from my students either it's just not something I care about, or either it's too depressing. But at the end of the day, you are not literate in being able to speak about anything that goes on in the real world if you don't know about it. So part of this behavior is trying to use real world events to encourage curiosity within our students and get them to start learning about what's going on in the world around them.
What was the name of that first podcast that you referenced?
The Daily Skim.
The Daily Skim?
Yeah. Yes, Skim, SKIMM. They have 2 things. Number one, a newsletter they send out every morning, as well as a podcast that they send out every evening around 5 p.m.
Fantastic.
So you get news in the morning and in the evening.
Great.
And they're not always marketing. There's not always marketing nuggets you pick up, but they're life nuggets, right? And consumers behave the same whether they're buying a product or they're voting for someone or they're making a choice in another way.
What advice? I don't know if we have any students on here right now, but what advice would you give students who are looking to pursue a career in consumer behavior, so that maybe if there are some instructors out there who are just starting their first class or consumer behavior course, that they can tee up the course with, hey, this is why you should pay attention to what's going on, because these are the careers that you can pursue and how to get there?
Yeah, so I think the first piece of advice I'd give any student, consumer behavior or not, is figure out what you want. It's becoming increasingly competitive to find the right role for you. And doing so and thinking about it and being introspective earlier gives you the leg up. It gives you the leg up because it means even as early as freshman year, and I teach in the business school at NYU, so kids come in knowing what they want to do. It's crazy. But as early as freshman year, you can start interning. And that enables you to do 2 things. First, it enables you to verify, is what I thought I wanted to do actually what I want to do, which 75% of the time the answer is no, but you need to have that learning. The second thing it enables you to do is start building your resume. At the end of the day, because the environment is so competitive, even though there's lots of jobs, getting the right job for you right now is still very difficult because the environment is so competitive, it enables you to list on your resume multiple things, real job opportunities that you've had, and that makes you more attractive to the employer. So I think if any of the professors that we have the pleasure of chatting with are looking to give their students advice on how to find that right job or that right internship or want to go into the field of consumer behavior, the first thing is, what do you want to do? Be real specific. Consumer behavior could be a marketing strategy job, which is similar to what I have. It could be a market research job. It could be acquisition marketing. It could be brand marketing. So figure out what you want to do and then start to test and learn through real world job opportunities.
It's fantastic advice. Thank you. So, Radhika, you mentioned occasionally if we can tee up the consumer behavior curriculum. You've mentioned your consumer behavior book. I don't know if we actually put a link in at all for folks to go check it out. What's unique about Radhika's book is the content, and she's alluded to some of this already, is the content is extremely up to date and relatable to brands and companies that your students are seeing today, are involved with today, using. And the other thing that we recently just added to that curriculum is a library of video case studies. And if you're not familiar with our video case studies, we looked at the way case studies are being delivered now and thought students probably want to just watch a case study instead of read 30 pages about a case study. And so we've gone out and filmed somewhere between 4 and 8 various case studies with real businesses. We sit down with them. They're anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes long, so they're short, biteable, but extremely effective ways to encourage student engagement and get them into case studies with a more enjoyable experience by allowing them to view. That link should be posted here. Feel free to jump in there and check it out. You get free access, lifetime access as an instructor. And if you're interested in hopping in and getting a demo of the platform, feel free to do that as well. Radhika, if there's any other questions that we have, I'm just going to look at the queue and make sure we don't have anything else. But I think that is it. Wait, one more came in.
Okay, no worries.
So I am writing consumer behavior this semester. You say we need to study the book 3 times. What is the best way to cement concepts? If you have time to answer this question, which we have probably just a second to answer this question. Did that question come in okay to you?
Yeah, I think I have a sense. One thing I want to clarify is I don't think you need to read the book 3 times. That would not be an engaging way to read the book once. I think as a general rule, those of us that are learning, we need to see, hear, and experience something a total of 3 times. And maybe it's you see it once, you hear it once, you experience it once, right? And that gets you there. I think it's just general human behavior that if we tell you something once, it may not stick, right? We're all really busy, we have a lot going on, etc. So I do think there's a lot of value in reading a book before you have class. Or if you are the professor, even what I do, I read the textbook, I use it to write my notes for class, and then I read those notes again before class 3 times, right? Read, make notes, read again. So I think there's a lot of value in making sure your students, or you as a student, read the book, come to class and listen to you as the professor or their classmates if they're teaching part of the class, and then that they do an exercise in class. One of the things we do in my class pretty prevalently is every, call it 25 to 30 minutes, we do an exercise related to the content that I'm delivering or the content in the book. And we do that so that students can actually connect the consumer behavior theory to the application of real world marketing. That's really critical because we want our students to understand not only the theory in the book, but how it pertains to how marketers do their job every day, especially because they may want that job in the future.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
All right, Radhika. Hey, We appreciate the time that you shared with us today. If anyone wants to learn more, like I said, about Radhika's work with Stukent and her consumer behavior textbook, there was a link earlier, or just go to Stukent.com, go to our courseware tab, and you'll find it under the consumer behavior section. Radhika, thank you so much, and we hope we get to hear from you sometime later in the future as well.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yep, we'll talk soon.
Bye.